Waitress gets mocked for her facial scar. Then a millionaire walks in and silences everyone. They whispered behind her back, every day, as she poured coffee and smiled through the sting of stares. They judged her not for her work ethic or her resilience, but for a scar that had once saved a life. The coffee pot hissed with irritation. Like it, too, had grown tired of being refilled every 20 minutes. Elena wiped her hands on her apron and turned to face the table by the window, the one she already knew would give her trouble. They were laughing too loudly. 4 men in sleek suits, their teeth gleaming, eyes sharp like glass edges. Elena could already feel it, like a prickle at the base of her neck. It wasn't the laughter that bothered her. It was the silence that followed when she approached. That pause, that look, as if her presence was a glitch in their otherwise polished afternoon. She placed the menus in front of them. "Special today is the turkey melt with tomato basil soup," she said. The one with the loudest watch and the smallest smile leaned forward. "What happened to your face?" he asked, with mock concern. A snicker, a sideways glance. The usual routine. "House fire," Elena replied flatly, not bothering to offer more. He wasn't really asking. He wanted a reaction. She gave him none, but someone was watching. 2 tables over, half hidden behind a newspaper, a man paused his reading. His name was Julian, though no one here knew that yet. Just a man in a charcoal coat, with quiet eyes and a face people didn't remember. He watched the exchange, his hand tightening around the coffee cup. Something in Elena's calm, in her refusal to flinch, struck him. It wasn't pride. It was something harder, something earned. The men moved on, talking about stocks, about bonuses, about women whose names they wouldn't remember. Elena returned behind the counter. Norma, the cook, glanced at her through the order window. "You all right, honey?" "Fine." The lie slid off her tongue like it had 1,000 times before. No one really wanted the truth. Elena hadn't always worked here. Once, years ago, she'd wanted to be an artist. She still had a sketchbook under her bed, the pages half finished. But dreams had been pushed aside after the fire, after the surgeries, after she had become the girl with the scar. It had happened when she was 11. A car accident. Her mother had passed out at the wheel. Her little brother, Max, trapped in the back. She remembered fire, the heat, and pulling him out. Then the pain. After that, hospitals, whispers, the new face that didn't quite match the old one. Julian didn't know any of that yet, but something in him was drawn to her. He stayed longer than usual, ordered another coffee, watched her with quiet curiosity. Elena didn't notice him. Not really. Men like him didn't usually notice women like her. That night, when her shift ended, Elena walked home alone. She always walked, even though the subway was faster. The cold air was honest. It didn't lie to her. She passed the bakery on 42nd, the one with the cupcakes that always looked too perfect to eat. She paused, looking at them, not with envy, but with the ache of remembering what it felt like to believe you could make something beautiful. Behind her, unnoticed, Julian crossed the street. He didn't follow her. Not then. But he'd be back. And next time, he would speak. The next morning, the diner felt different. Rain tapped against the windows, soft and steady, like a clock that had lost its patience. Inside, the coffee still burned slightly at the edges, the silverware still clinked, and the regulars still read their newspapers like it was a duty. But Elena felt something new. She couldn't name it yet, but it scratched at the back of her mind. He came in again. Same coat, same table, same calm eyes. She noticed him this time. How could she not? It wasn't the way he looked. He wasn't movie star handsome. There was something else. Stillness, like he didn't need to be noticed to know who he was. He gave her a polite nod. Nothing more. She refilled his cup, the coffee steaming between them. "You were here yesterday," she said. He nodded again. "Good coffee." She smirked. That's the first time anyone said that with a straight face. He smiled, and for a moment the silence between them felt easy. Elena walked away before it could get complicated. Later that day, when the lunch rush died down, he was still there. Reading, not a phone in sight, just a man and a paperback book that looked older than half the waitstaff. Elena brought him a slice of pie. On the house. He raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" She shrugged. "You didn't laugh yesterday." He took a bite, considered it. "You deserve better than that," he said simply. Elena froze. It wasn't the words that struck her. It was the way he said them. Not pity, not flattery, just truth. "You don't know me," she said. "I'm trying to," he replied. That evening, after her shift, Elena sat on the fire escape outside her apartment. She lit a candle even though she had light. She watched the city breathe below her. The man with the eyes, Julian, though she still didn't know his name, stayed in her thoughts. The next day, he came again and again. It became a pattern. He never stayed too long, never asked personal questions, never tried to impress. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. But every time, Elena felt like she could exhale in his presence. Then came the question. They were alone in the diner. A rainy Tuesday, just before close. He was helping her carry napkin holders to the back. She hadn't asked. He just did it. "What did you want to be?" he asked. She looked at him, startled. "I mean before this," he clarified. "Before life made you someone else." Elena didn't answer right away. She hadn't said it out loud in years. "An artist," she finally said. "I used to draw, paint sometimes. Stupid things." "Why'd you stop?" She touched the side of her face, the scar running from just below her left eye down to her jawline. "Because the world stopped seeing me as someone who could make anything beautiful." He didn't look away. "You still do," he said. "They just don't recognize it." She laughed once, low. "You don't even know my last name." "I will," he said, "if you let me." She should have been scared or suspicious, but she wasn't. The next morning, she opened the sketchbook under her bed for the first time in years. The pages smelled of dust and something old, like a chapter never finished. Her hands trembled. She drew anyway. Julian didn't show up the next day, or the next. For the first time in weeks, the corner table sat empty. Norma teased her. "Your quiet friend taking a break?" Elena shrugged, trying not to show how much she noticed. 3 days passed. Then 5. On the 6th day, a woman walked in, dressed too sharply for the place. She didn't sit, just asked for a coffee to go. Before leaving, she placed a small envelope on the counter. "For Elena," she said, "from a friend." Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letter, no explanation. Just a charcoal sketch. Her face in precise, delicate detail, scar and all. But in his lines, she looked strong, almost noble. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, "I see you." That night, Elena cried for the first time in a long time. not out of sadness, but because someone, for the first time in years, had seen her whole. The photo wasn't planned. It was taken on a quiet afternoon, on a park bench across from the diner. Elena had just ended her shift. Julian was waiting outside, as he sometimes did now, holding 2 cups of coffee. They sat together, like any 2 people would. They didn't touch. They didn't kiss. But they laughed. And in that second, the flash caught something real. The next morning, the world turned upside down. It started with whispers. Norma was the first to notice. She came out of the kitchen holding her phone like it had bitten her. "Elena, you need to see this." On the screen was a photo, blurry but unmistakable. Her, sitting with Julian. Her smile open, his gaze on her like she mattered. Above the image, a headline. "Billionaire Julian Harrow seen cozying up with mystery waitress in Manhattan. The internet reacts." Elena's heart stopped. She stared at the screen. A storm of headlines had already begun. Beauty and the Beast? Who is the scarred woman beside Julian Harrow? From Fortune to Fries. Harrow's surprising taste. The comments were worse. Is this real or charity? He must have a savior complex. She looks like a car crash. Bold of her to be seen in daylight. Elena felt like she was drowning in a noise only she could hear. She hadn't even known his last name. Julian Harrow. She searched it, hands trembling. He was on magazine covers. Owned companies she'd heard of but never cared to remember. One of those people who could disappear behind tinted windows and private jets. And she? She poured coffee. She carried Burns. The next time he came to the diner, she was gone. She didn't leave a note, didn't answer calls. She changed apartments, deleted her accounts, told no one where she went. Norma didn't know. Her brother Max didn't know. Not even the landlord could say where she'd gone. Julian searched. He hired someone, quietly, no threats, no pressure. He walked the streets himself, stood in front of the diner where they first met, talked to Norma, waited. But weeks passed, and she didn't return. And Elena? Elena wasn't hiding because of shame. She was hiding from the way the world reduced her to a headline. All her life she'd fought to be more than the scar. But now it was everywhere. Her face was on screens with red arrows circling the mark on her cheek. People analyzed her expression, her posture, even her shoes. She had finally let someone in, and the world had turned it into spectacle. So she disappeared, but she didn't vanish. Somewhere far from the city, in a quiet town with no gossip pages, Elena began again. She worked nights in a tiny bakery kitchen, sleeping on a cot in the back. No one knew her name. She didn't talk much, but she drew again. And one night, when the ovens were quiet and the sky was low, she took a piece of chalk and wrote 2 words on the wall above the sink. Scar and kindness. It became the name of the bakery she opened 2 seasons later. The space was small, bare brick walls, wooden tables, mismatched chairs, but everything in it was hers. Every pie, every painting on the wall. She even hung one of her old sketches behind the counter. A girl sitting in front of a mirror, scarred, but smiling. People came. Not because of the name, not because of any story, but because the place felt like truth. Elena never used her full name on the door. She didn't want fame. She wanted realness. And slowly, gently, people stopped seeing the scar first. They saw her. But in Manhattan, Julian had never stopped looking, until, one rainy day, months later, His driver paused at a stoplight near a small-town bakery. And through the fogged window, Julian saw a familiar figure. Flower on her sleeves, hair tied back, smiling. He didn't enter right away. Julian sat in the car for nearly 10 minutes, staring through the fogged glass at the woman inside the small bakery. She moved with quiet focus, placing muffins on a tray, adjusting a crooked vase on a table, laughing briefly with a customer whose toddler was licking the glass display. She looked okay. No, more than that. She looked like she belonged. He opened the car door without a word and stepped into the rain. Inside, the bell above the bakery door gave a soft chime. Elena turned and froze. She didn't drop the tray in her hands. She didn't cry. She didn't run. But for one breathless moment, she simply stared, as if trying to convince herself he was real and not a dream stitched together by memory. He looked different, a little thinner, a little older, not in a bad way, more human. Julian spoke first. "I've had worse croissants, but not better coffee." She exhaled, a shaky sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. "You found me?" He nodded. "Took a while." "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I wasn't finished." She looked at the floor. "I was." "I know," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." A pause stretched between them, thick with all the words unsaid. "I didn't leave because of you," she said at last. "I know that too." They sat down at a table near the window, the same way they had in the city. Only now the sounds outside were birds and distant cars, not honking taxis. Julian's coat was damp. Elena handed him a towel from behind the counter without thinking. "So," he said, "this is yours?" She nodded. "Every splinter, every burned pan, every moment I almost gave up." He looked around. There were drawings on the walls, imperfect, powerful, portraits of people with freckles, wrinkles, scars, and crooked teeth, people who looked real. "You called it scar and kindness." She met his gaze. "Because I got tired of hiding one and forgetting the other." Julian smiled, but there was something cautious in it, a kind of respect that came from knowing she didn't owe him anything. "I didn't come here to fix anything," he said. "Not you, not the past. I wanted to see if you were okay." "I wasn't," she replied, "but now I'm better than I ever was." They didn't speak for a while. She brought him tea. He stayed through the slow hour between lunch and afternoon pastries. A few customers came and went. No one recognized him. No one cared who he was, and he seemed oddly grateful for that. At one point, a girl, no older than 10, stood staring at one of the drawings on the wall. It was of a woman with a prosthetic leg, laughing. The girl asked Elena, "Is that real?" Elena crouched beside her. "Everyone in here is real, including you." The girl beamed. Her father bought 3 cookies. Julian watched all of it. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. As the sky darkened, Elena leaned against the counter and asked softly, "What happens now?" He stood slowly, placing his empty cup in the bin like any other customer. "I don't know," he said, "but I'll be back tomorrow." Her voice was steady. "Not out of guilt?" He looked at her seriously. "Out of choice." And then he left. Just like that. No dramatic gestures, no confessions, just truth. That night, Elena walked through the empty bakery, flipping off the lights one by one. She paused at the chalkboard near the register where customers wrote little notes. Kind words, jokes, memories. She picked up a stick of chalk and added one more line to the board. Sometimes we find home when we stop looking. Then she turned off the last light. It didn't happen overnight. Julian kept coming back. Sometimes for tea, sometimes for nothing at all. He would sit quietly in the corner of the bakery while Elena worked. He never interrupted, never pushed. At first, they barely spoke. But there was comfort in the silence, a rhythm. One afternoon, when the rain had paused and the world outside looked unusually soft, Julian stayed behind after the last customer left. Elena was wiping down the counter. "You ever miss it?" she asked without looking at him. "Miss what?" "The world you came from." He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said. "But mostly I miss the idea that it ever meant something." She nodded slowly. "And you?" he asked. "I don't miss anything," she replied. "I'm finally exactly where I'm supposed to be." He smiled gently. "I believe that." They talked a little more that night, about everything and nothing. He told her how his parents had never really approved of anything he did unless it came with a title or a magazine spread. How he'd spent half his life wondering if he was impressing the wrong people. She told him about Max, now in college, who still called her every Sunday. How she once tried to write a children's book and stopped after page 3. How the bakery had nearly failed twice in the first month. It wasn't a confession, it was connection. And slowly something real began to build again. Months passed. One morning, Julian walked in carrying a small cardboard box. "What's that?" Elena asked. He set it on the counter and opened it without a word. Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign. Burned into the wood were the words, "Everything here has a story. What's yours?" Elena ran her fingers across the letters. "I thought it could hang over the door," he said. "It will," she answered, her voice catching. "It will." They didn't label whatever they had. There was no announcement, no ring, no fairy tale. But little by little, Julian stayed longer. He began helping in the kitchen. Badly at first. He burned the first 3 batches of muffins and once spilled an entire sack of flour onto the floor. Elena laughed so hard she cried. He was patient. She was careful. And together, they became something not perfect, but real. One evening, long after the last customer left, and the closed sign was flipped, they sat on the floor of the bakery, backs against the counter, eating leftover pie from paper plates. Julian turned to her. "You know, you saved your brother from a burning car when you were just a child." She shrugged. "I didn't have a choice." "Yes," he said softly. "You did." She looked at him, unsure what to say. "You've spent your whole life acting like that scar is the beginning of your story," he continued. "But it's not. It's just proof that you've always been brave." Elena closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, she reached out and took his hand. Not like a fairy tale, like a choice. A year later, the bakery was thriving. People came not just for pastries, but for the atmosphere. The art on the walls kept changing. Now some were drawn by customers, some by local kids, some still by Elena, who had started drawing every night again. There was a photo near the register now. It wasn't staged. Someone had taken it without them noticing. Elena laughing, Julian beside her, rolling out dough, his sleeves messy, her hair falling into her eyes. No headlines, no captions, just life. And in small letters, framed underneath it, "Kindness is not a weakness. It's the beginning of everything."